is the full editor, and it is going to have a lot more tools and options and maybe be a little more intimidating at first to use. So we're going to spend time quickly going over the interface today, but next week and the week after, we'll be spending a lot of time in the full editor. So if the information you get today seems a little bit overwhelming, don't worry. We're going to slow down and do it all over again in more detail in the coming weeks. Also, as Cindy said, we have that website at elements.cindyshebley.com that's going to have replays of the class. There's Elements user guides posted up there for you to download. We'll have some video tutorials of things, questions you might ask. We also have a small survey up there to try and get some feedback on the class, so we're covering the sections and the topics you're most interested in, and we can try to improve things that may not be working quite the way we hoped or quite the way you hoped. So please stop by that site, elements.cindyshebley.com, in the coming week and take the survey and look at some of the information we've posted there for you. So let's get a look now at the full editor. This is the most powerful section in Photoshop Elements for transforming your pictures and for creating elements for use on your websites or with YouTube videos or on blogs, anywhere you might want to share pictures or any kind of image that you can make yourself. Again, across the top, we have the drop-down menus. You'll notice when we go through them now that things that may have been grayed out on the quick editor start to come through on the full editor. You have many more options of things you can do. Again, we have the full edit, quick edit tabs and the same icons here as before, and the same arrangement of tools down the left-hand side and palettes on the right. But both the tools and the palettes are very different. We have many more tools and a very different selection of palettes. Each tool will have the specific options along the top just as it did in Quick Edit, but there will be more options and there will be different options for every tool. Also, you'll notice on the tools there's a little sort of triangle on the corner of some of them. That means that this tool is actually a collection of tools. When you see that triangle, if you click on the tool, you'll have several different versions of that tool to choose from. So let's see what we have here. We have the Move tool, the magnifying tool, the hand tool, and the dropper, and then a spacer. And you see what happens is we have a few more tools and a spacer, some more and a spacer. Elements has grouped these by similar functions. They do similar things to your pictures. So the Move tool is used, you click on the photo, and you can use it to select areas. We only have one thing here as the background. Let me change that to a layer. You can use it to select your photo, move it off the canvas, which is a kind of an odd thing to do, but you may have occasion to do that. Or when you've created other elements within your photograph or within layers, this Move and Selection tool will allow you to change the direction of those elements and layers. The magnifying tool works just the same as before, but you see you have a few more options for the magnifier. The hand tool is always the same, and it doesn't really do very much, but it allows you to scroll through several windows now if you have windows open. The color picker will allow you to adjust the foreground and background colors by clicking on the color picker. You can have either a 1-point sample, 3 by 3 pixels, or a 5 by 5 average of pixels. when you come over to your picture, you can pick the foreground color so that it exactly matches something in your picture. You may want to use that to paint with an exact matching color, or perhaps, as I'm going to do as we go along, you'll want to match the color for some text. So that eyedropper lets you change, if we want to change the background from white to, instead of pure black, to more of the gray that's used here. You see, we can do that. And these little arrows allow you to switch foreground and background colors quickly. This is the Marquee Tool. We have, you see there's a little arrow here, and we have the square and the round Marquee Tool. You can draw what they call a marquee, which is sort of a selector around a picture. Once you've done that, you can feather the edges, and by that I mean if we say 30, and I'm going to hit enter, and now I have this selection drawn with the 30% feather. I'm going to just delete my selection. And what it does is it makes the edges less harsh. Let's bring that back in, deselect my selection, and let's use the round thing. And you can see there's a lot of things you would do besides select and use a feathering tool to do it. But it helps you take parts of an area. You may want to put a frame around them. You may want to drop another area into this selection. In coming weeks, we'll see how you can paste into a selection. The Marquee Tool is very useful for that. Also notice up here we have, this just is a new selection. Then you have Add to Selection. Now here you can see we've selected one part. If we draw a second circle, we've now created a much larger selection, and they've blended together. They don't actually even have to do that. We can just select another area. We can also subtract from the selection. So if I do this, that selection up there is gone, and the top of this circle is gone, and now the selection is kind of this funny shape. So you're able to do more than just circles and squares by using the Add to and Subtract from. And this tool will just select parts where they intersect. So if I go like this, we lose both of those edges on the selection and just get the intersection. The Marquee Tool is pretty useful when you're working with layers or you're trying to work with multiple pictures. It's not used quite as much on a straight photograph. The Lasso Tool is another selection tool. When we draw freehand with the lasso, we've just selected, and again we can feather it, we've just selected an area of the picture, and we can apply certain effects to that selection. You may find that, again, we have the original selection, the Add to, the Subtract from, and the Overlap. You may find that when you do that, you can't quite find the tool you want. It's too hard to select from. Like this has a lot of edges, and if you're just doing a great big old selection, it's pretty easy. But if you really wanted to select that motorcycle, it'll be very hard to go along with it. The second lasso is called the magnetic lasso. And if you have a good deal of contrast, it works well. You just click and move along your object and click, and it'll try and follow the outline. Every time you click your left mouse button, it drops down a point so it's able to follow a little better. So as you can see, I'm doing a much better job here of staying on the outline of this bike than I would if I tried to do this freehand. If you make a mistake and you get whoops out here, you just use your backspace key to get back onto where you want to be. And then, once again, just drop, come on you, drop down, do your click, because there's not that much contrast, so it can be a little hard for elements to know what to choose. And you can go along kind of tediously outlining the motorcycle. I'm just going to jump the whole thing here by hitting my escape key. This last one is called the Polygonal Lasso Tool, and it just draws straight lines. So if we wanted to make a triangle, we can do it with perfectly square edges. Again, that one's not used as much on photographs. That's used more when you're doing things like making buttons or elements put on a web page. This is called the Magic Wand, and it has settings again, the new selection, add to, subtract from, and overlap, and a tolerance. The tolerance here of 50 is very high. I'm going to move that down to 10. Anti-alias means it smooths the edges for you, sort of like feathering. Contiguous means it'll only pick the colors within the area you're clicking. If you unclick that, it'll pick the colors that are similar anywhere in the photograph. So I'm going to click on this yellow part of the motorbike, and you'll see it's picked things that are within 10 points on the color value scale anywhere on this bike that are the same color. I'm going to unselect that and pick contiguous, and you see it just does it in this area. I'm going to dump that again and make, instead of a tolerance of 10, we're going to make 35. And you see we get a much bigger area. If I go into Add to Selection and click some more, we can get this whole motorbike thing chosen pretty easily. You may want, now let's pull this up. You see we have some white spots here. You may or may not want to include something like that. And if you stick with the magic wand, increasing your tolerance, you're going to get a lot you don't want. That's when you would move back over to the lasso, and you would add to the selection. Just draw your lasso tool, and you'll be able, oh, that's not my lasso tool. Just draw your lasso tool around it. Doesn't have to be very good. And it's now included in the selection of the yellow of the motorcycle. So, again, you may not feel like, why would I want to select this? Just remember you have lots of ways to select, and in the coming weeks we're going to look at them in detail. Here's the tool we use, the Magic Selector brush. We used this before. And it's not going to work really well here because this tool has, this picture has too many different things going on. But let's take the Subtract brush, which you can see there's a little minus here, and tell it we don't want this brick wall. See how we can do in getting rid of the brick. You don't have to pick it exactly. You just want to sort of scribble on it. And we didn't get a whole lot taken out. It didn't like what I did. So first I'm going to have to tell it what I do want, I guess, which is the motorcycle. And again, you don't have to be very exact. So I'm telling it I want to select this motorcycle. And it did a pretty good job there selecting the motorcycle. But again, we have the background that we don't want in, this darkness, and so it would take a lot of touching up, and it didn't include this, to do this, a picture like this. So we're going to see different ways to work with these pictures in the coming weeks. Then we have the text tool. You just click on it and click on your picture, and remember I picked this yellow so it would match my motorcycle. 36-point Arial black. This is just like it is in anything else. You can choose your font. You can choose its size, whether you want it to be bold, regular, italic. And I'm just going to type on here, and you can see that we can add a headline. If I take my Move tool, I can move the word bike around on here. So let's just put it there and click anywhere, and it's set. But it's not in stone. You can go back and click on the Move tool again and click on bike, and I can keep moving it. Then there's the Crop tool, which is the same as always. This is called the cookie cutter tool, and it gives you some shapes. You can see them up here, and they'll cut out parts of your picture in these shapes. None of these make any sense at all with a motorcycle, but if you're making a greeting card and you want to maybe click out a picture of one of Cindy's dogs in a bone shape, by using that, you see what happens is just within that cookie cutter's cutout, it would be a bone-shaped picture of the dog. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to get rid of it. You change the shapes by looking in here. This fly outside gives you all the shapes you've loaded. They're organized by what their description would be. So you can pick all, or you can just scroll through various typical shapes of like music notes, or if you pick nature, you'll have some flowers and clouds and things like that. Again, you don't use that a lot in picking elements for pictures, but you might use it in making greeting cards and things like that. Let me move my bike thing up here. This is called the straight line tool, or the horizon tool. You'll see this line on the bike is not exactly straight. If you take your straight line tool and just draw, you can change where the horizon is on the picture, and it'll make it a straight line. This comes in handy, especially if you live here in the Puget Sound, if you're out taking pictures of the sound and you don't get it quite right. If you're on a boat or something, it's very hard to keep your horizon straight. You can just come in and straighten them in elements really quickly. Red eye tool we've seen works the same way here, except you can change the pupil size and you can change the darken amount, so you have a little more control over it. This is called the healing brush. It takes areas. Let's go up here and look at this motorcycle. I'm going to take the spot healing brush, and you'll see you have a size, kind of a brush you can pick from your brushes, proximity or texture, or create a texture, sample all layers. I actually don't want to be on that. I want to be here. You might want to take out this highlight on your bike. If you come and click the healing brush, it'll just match the closest colors and take it out. Now, I'm using it much too large just so you can see what's happening. You would actually want to make it a little bit smaller and make it match a little bit better. If it's not clicking in the color you want, you change it to the healing brush, and when I right-click, I can change the size of the brush itself and the hardness and the spacing and what kind of pressure I want to have. Then to actually choose a spot, I hold down my Alt key, and you see how the circle changes to a target. Click once, and now when I come up to the spot I want to cover, it's going to take that area I clicked for my target and use it to fill in. So it's a little bit more exact in actually matching. So that's sort of similar to the clone stamp tool, which is the next tool. The clone stamp tool, here's a really big clone stamp tool. Say I don't want this shadow in here on my picture anymore. I'm going to make this brush a little bit smaller so I can fit it in that area. I would come up to this wall, hold down my Alt key. I've picked a spot, and now I can just start painting with the clone stamp tool to get rid of that shadow and fill in bricks. And again, you would be more careful than I'm being here in doing it to try and match up the mortar lines. You can also have what they call the pattern stamp tool. And you'll notice over here, we have again the normal blend mode and the opacity. Over here, we could have made this a little more see-through when we'd originally done it. Let's do that, and you'll see. Actually, let's do that E. and put it over here. You see how the E comes in. I'm going to do it really big so you can see it better. The K is going to come in kind of lightened. It's not, the opacity has been dropped down. That makes it a little more transparent. So that's another element that you can change in how it works. The pattern tool has the same question of opacity and blending, but it gives you these patterns that are loaded by default in elements so that you can put things in here that you might not want to go out and work with yourself. So I'm just putting in rocks down here to take over the rocks that were already in place, and get rid of my bike thing. So you can paint in patterns of things that are with the pattern stamp tool. This is the eraser tool, and again you have the regular eraser. This is the background eraser, and this is the magic eraser. The magic eraser has a tolerance level like we saw on some of the selection tools. If we set the tolerance very high, it'll erase a whole lot of stuff in one click. If we set the background eraser and tell it its limits are contiguous, when we hold down the thing, hold down the left mouse button, it'll just click right where we're taking, scraping it. If we say discontiguous and hold down the mouse button, it'll be able to pick a much bigger selection to get rid of. And again, the tolerance levels, I usually keep them really low. You can set them kind of high, and it'll erase a much more wider area for you. And you can use just a regular eraser, and it'll go right over everything. So again, you want to experiment. You have an opacity slider so you can make it heavier or lighter. You can pick your brush, your pencil, or your block. Brush is fat, pencil is a little rougher, and block is just a square pixel. So you can take it individual pixels or, oops, that's not how we undo things. Trying to get this back to where we started with it. This is a brush tool, and it's used for painting on your pictures. You can change the size, the shape, the hardness, and the texture of your brush. You have a lot of choices when you're painting. Let's look at just something really odd like the star brush. And I'm going to make it really big. You don't normally brush things on it that size, but you see, if we come up here, you might be able to see how the star brush has flares coming out on the side of it instead of just staying in place. It gives you a lot of options for changing, when you change the brushes, changing the way that they work inside of your picture. You might not always want to just have a straight edge brush tool. So experiment with them, especially if you enjoy doing scrapbooking or something like that. The brush tools are very useful for things like that. The paint bucket tool, you can paint the whole picture, which is kind of a weird thing to do. Or you can use it with the Marquee tool if I wanted to make a square in this area. And see, we have the feathers, so you see how the edges are rounded. And then I'd come up with my paint bucket and just paint into that area. You can then confine it to a specific spot and make it look a little different if maybe you want to come back later and write something on there. This is the gradient tool. I'm going to just create a new layer here and fill it with yellow. I got my selection tool on still. Let me deselect. Fill the whole layer. Now, I'm going to do it again. It's annoying me. Fill the whole layer. A gradient is one of those things that goes from one color to another, sometimes light to dark, sometimes red to green, like that. You have very many choices in how it'll go. It can go half and half, so that you hold down your shift key, draw a line, and you see how it switches across here. You can go make it come from the inside out. You can make it be, let's see what it is here. Divide it in half with a arrow, a diamond shape here. You can go like that. So you have a lot of choices in the gradient tool. It's usually a very popular tool. You can edit it to make it different looks, different sizes. You have different colors to choose from. So it'll take whatever pictures you've put on, whatever colors you've chosen as your foreground and your background, and draw with them. I'm just going to get rid of those layers I put on. This is a shape tool, and it's used for drawing certain shapes. This isn't for drawing on pictures. This would be used for making buttons for a website or something like that. And lastly, down here we have the burn and dodge tools and the sponge tool. You're not going to use those so much. They're kind of left over from photo editing in a dark room. They'll make parts of your picture lighter or darker. They'll also be able to smudge it and see that. It's kind of odd, interesting, and disturbing. But Elements now has so many other features built into it to do things like that. Filters and layers, correction layers, that they're not used as much. And then we've seen these. So that's a quick roundup of what happens with these tools and what they can do. I don't want to, as I said, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed with them. There's a lot to learn with the Elements tools, but they're going to go into them in detail in the coming weeks. So I'm going to turn this over now to Cindy and make her the presenter again. And she's going to talk to you about the palettes and the kind of things you can do with the palette layers that are on the right-hand side of your screen.